You're sitting somewhere quiet. Your phone lights up, you see the name, you know exactly who it is, and instead of picking up, you just watch it ring. Your chest does something, not quite anxiety, not quite dread, but something in between. The call goes to voicemail, you exhale, and almost immediately a familiar thought creeps in. Why can't I just be normal about this? Maybe you've told yourself you'll call back later. Maybe later never came. Maybe you've constructed entire mental scripts about what you'd say, rehearsed the opening line, imagined the pauses, and then decided, no, not today. People around you have probably said things, why don't you ever pick up? Are you avoiding me? It's just a phone call. And you've nodded, maybe laughed it off, maybe even agreed that yes, something is probably wrong with you. But here's what nobody has ever told you, and what psychology has quietly been uncovering for decades. The way you relate to phone calls is not a character flaw. It is a deeply intelligent, deeply personal response that your nervous system developed for very specific reasons. And once you understand those reasons, you might never see yourself the same way again. Let's start with what's actually happening inside your body in that moment the phone rings. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio spent years studying how the brain processes unexpected stimuli, and what he found was this. The brain does not treat a ringing phone as a neutral event. It treats it as an interruption of your current mental state, a sudden demand for social performance with zero preparation time. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of you that organizes thought and language, hasn't had time to prepare, and your amygdala, the ancient alarm system deep in your brain, reads that unpreparedness as mild threat. Not danger, not fear exactly, but something that registers as not safe yet. Now here's where it gets interesting. For most people, this alarm settles within a second or two, and they pick up without thinking. But for a specific group of people, and you were likely one of them, the alarm doesn't settle that quickly. Not because something is broken, but because your brain is wired with higher sensitivity, more elaborate social processing, and a deeper need for psychological readiness before entering a human interaction. You are not lazy. You are not rude. Your brain simply runs a more complex pre-flight checklist before it's willing to speak. Now, within the group of people who don't pick up calls, there are actually very different inner worlds at work. Some people avoid calls because they are deep processors. These are the ones who, in text, are thoughtful, articulate, even poetic. But in real-time spoken conversation, something shifts. The speed required, the instant response, the inability to edit, the constant performance of sounding okay, it overwhelms a brain that naturally needs more time to think before speaking. Psychologist Elaine Aron, who spent her career researching what she called the highly sensitive person, found that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes everything more deeply: sensory input, emotional cues, the weight of words. For these people, a phone call isn't just a conversation. It's a real-time performance with no script, no pause button, and no ability to choose your words carefully. Texting feels safer not because they're hiding, but because it gives their actual intelligence room to breathe. Then there's another group entirely. These are the ones who avoid calls not because of how they process, but because of what calls have historically meant for them. Think about it. When you were young, did phone calls usually bring good news or complicated news? Were there adults in your life who called when they needed something, when something was wrong, when conflict was coming? For many people, the ringing phone became classically conditioned, in the most Pavlovian sense, to signal incoming emotional labor. The body learned, before the mind could even articulate it, a call means I need to be ready to manage someone else's feelings. And so now, even when the person calling is someone you love, even when there's no logical reason to feel that weight, your body still braces. That's not avoidance. That's a memory living in your muscles. And then there are the ones who would desperately love to pick up, but there's this invisible wall. They reach for the phone and something just stops them. These are often people who carry what attachment researchers call anxious or disorganized attachment patterns, developed in early relationships where connection felt unpredictable. Sometimes warmth, sometimes withdrawal, sometimes love, sometimes criticism. The phone call represents all of that at once, an open portal to another person with no way of knowing which version of the relationship is waiting on the other end. Psychologist John Bowlby, who spent his life studying how early bonds shape our adult nervous systems, would have recognized this immediately. When your first experiences of human connection carried a current of uncertainty, your whole system learns to pause before entering relational space. Picking up the phone means being emotionally available on demand. And for someone whose history taught them that emotional availability led to pain, that is not a small ask. It can feel enormous, exhausting even, before the conversation has begun. And here's the part that almost nobody says out loud. Sometimes not picking up is actually an act of self-protection that your younger self desperately needed and never got. The tragedy is that you're still using it long after the threat has passed. But understanding that doesn't make you weak. It makes you someone who survived something and whose nervous system is still loyally standing guard. There's a fourth group worth naming, and this one is quieter, less obvious. These are people who are not avoidant, not anxious, not overwhelmed. They simply live in an internal world so rich, so textured, so full of ongoing thought and feeling that a phone ringing can feel genuinely intrusive, not because they don't care about people, but because they were in the middle of something. Not a task, not a show, but an internal experience, a chain of thought, a moment of stillness, a memory they were sitting with. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who gave us the concept of flow, say that it's a state of deep absorption where time dissolves and thinking becomes effortless. He found that interruptions of flow don't just pause the experience, they collapse it entirely. You can't resume flow. You have to rebuild it from scratch. And for people whose inner life is their sanctuary, their laboratory, their most honest place, an unexpected call doesn't just interrupt their afternoon, it breaks something delicate. These people often feel guilty about this because the world has taught them that being available to others is a virtue and being unavailable is selfish. But there is nothing selfish about protecting the inner life that makes you who you are. Introversion, depth, the need for uninterrupted interior space, these are not personality defects. Cognitive scientists increasingly understand them as cognitive strengths, adapted for a different kind of contribution to the world. What all of these people share, the deep processor, the emotionally conditioned avoider, the anxiously attached, the interior liver, is this. They are not broken versions of people who are good at phone calls. They are fully formed, psychologically coherent people whose relationship with real-time verbal connection reflects something true and meaningful about how they were built and what they've been through. The world will keep telling you to just pick up, and maybe sometimes you will, and maybe sometimes you won't. But what matters, what actually changes something at the root level, is understanding why. Not so you can fix yourself, but so you can finally stop punishing yourself for something that was never a flaw to begin with. You are not antisocial. You are not a bad friend. You are not emotionally unavailable or difficult or broken. You are someone whose nervous system takes the act of human connection seriously enough that it requires something real before entering it. And honestly, in a world full of people who talk constantly and feel nothing, that kind of depth is not a problem. It is quietly, profoundly, one of the most human things about you. If this landed somewhere real for you, sit with it for a moment. You don't have to share it, you don't have to explain it to anyone. But if you know someone else who watches their phone ring and exhales when it stops, maybe they need to hear this too.